You should assume full responsibility.
Responsibility for what?
In 1982, the film Poltergeist told a terrifying story about a house built on a desecrated burial ground. But what if the real horror wasn't on the screen? For decades, a dark legend has surrounded the film franchise, whispered in Hollywood, fueled by a string of bizarre accidents, mysterious illnesses, and violent deaths.
They're here.
Do you see them?
They call it the Poltergeist Curse. Many dismiss it as tragic coincidence, but the pattern of tragedy is too chilling to ignore. A pattern suggesting the horror didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Today, we count down the 10 horrifying truths behind the legend. The facts are real. The stories are documented, and they will make you question everything you thought you knew about this iconic film. Number 10. The Haunted Homecoming. The curse began subtly. It started not with death, but with a quiet, unsettling invasion. Jobeth Williams, the actress who played the terrified mother, Diane Freeling, reported a strange phenomenon during the filming of the first movie. Each day, after hours on a set filled with manufactured chaos and fear, she would return to the sanctuary of her own home, only to find that something was wrong. The pictures on her walls were crooked, every single one. Thinking nothing of it, she would straighten them. But the next day, when she returned from the set, she would find them all tilted again. It happened day after day. It was a classic sign of a poltergeist, a minor disturbance meant to unnerve. But the implication was terrifying. The film is about the violation of a family's safe space. For Jobeth Williams, that theme was no longer just a script. It was as if a presence from the set had crossed the threshold into her private life, a warning that the story she was helping to tell was not entirely fiction. The haunting had followed her home. Number 9. The Clown's Attack. For many, this was the face of their childhood fears. The clown doll that terrorized young Robbie Freeling was inspired by one of producer Steven Spielberg's own phobias. But on set, this prop, designed to simulate horror, became terrifyingly real. During the scene where the clown attacks Robbie, the mechanical prop malfunctioned. The doll's arms, wrapped around the neck of child actor Oliver Robbins, began to tighten for real. Robbins started to choke. He couldn't breathe. At first, the directors thought the young actor was just giving a brilliant, improvised performance. They told him to keep going. But Steven Spielberg noticed the boy's face was beginning to turn purple. He realized this wasn't acting. Spielberg lunged forward and pried the clown's arms from the child's neck, saving him from being genuinely strangled to death by an inanimate object. The line between pretend and peril had vanished. The psychological dread of the curse had now escalated to physical, life-threatening violence. A toy designed to create fear had become a weapon. Number 8. A fateful flight. For some associated with Poltergeist, the curse seemed to lie in wait, emerging years later in the most random and catastrophic ways. Richard Lawson played Ryan, a member of the paranormal investigation team in the first film. A decade later, in March of 1992, he was a passenger on US Air Flight 405, scheduled to fly from New York to Cleveland. The plane crashed shortly after takeoff from LaGuardia Airport. It was a horrific disaster.
Boarding tower, Kilometer 274, approaching dial.
Of the 51 people on board, 27 were killed. Richard Lawson was one of the survivors, but his survival came down to a single chilling twist of fate. Lawson was originally booked to sit in the coach section, but while boarding, he was recognized by a fan who happened to be a ticket attendant. As a kind gesture, she upgraded him to first class. One of the passengers who died in the crash was sitting in Lawson's originally assigned row. Was it a miracle? Or was it something more sinister? The event introduces a horrifying question about the nature of the curse. It suggests that those connected to the film were marked, and that survival itself could be a form of psychological torment, a near miss from a malevolent force that was still watching, still waiting. Number 7. The Shaman's Warning. When production began on Poltergeist 2, the other side, the cast and crew felt an immediate sense of unease on the set. One person took these feelings more seriously than anyone else. Will Sampson, who played the Native American shaman, Taylor, was not just an actor. He was a real-life shaman of the Muskogee Nation. Sampson became convinced that the set was genuinely haunted by what he called alien spirits. He felt the production was being plagued by negative energy. To protect the cast and crew, he returned to the set late one night, alone, and performed an authentic, sacred ritual of exorcism. For a time, the cast reported feeling a sense of relief. But the man who confronted the darkness could not escape it. Will Sampson suffered from a chronic degenerative condition called scleroderma less than a year after. Poltergeist 2 was released. He underwent a heart-lung transplant. He died from post-operative kidney failure in June of 1987. He was only 53 years old. His death, while medically explained, became a cornerstone of the curse legend. A spiritual authority had validated the threat, confronted it directly, and then perished. It was as if he had paid the ultimate price for challenging the spirits of Poltergeist. Number 6. The Face of Death. The villain of Poltergeist 2 is one of the most frightening figures in horror history. The evil preacher Henry Kane was a walking corpse, a skeletal specter of pure malevolence. His horrifying appearance on screen was not the work of makeup or special effects. It was real. The actor Julian Beck was dying of stomach cancer during the production. He had been diagnosed in 1983 before filming began, and his gaunt, emaciated look was the authentic result of his terminal illness. His performance was said to conjure a palpable feeling of dread among the cast, who knew they were acting alongside a man who was genuinely close to death. Julian Beck died in September 1985, months before the film was ever released. The movie didn't just depict a monster. It captured and broadcast a man's actual painful decay and presented it as entertainment. This adds a layer of ghoulish human horror to the curse. It suggests the film itself became a vessel for real-world darkness, co-opting a man's suffering to create its villain. The curse wasn't just attacking the cast. It had become part of the film's very fabric. Number 5. The Axeman's Victim. The curse, it seems, is patient. It can lie dormant for decades before erupting with shocking, senseless violence. Lou Perryman had a small role in the original Poltergeist, playing a character named Pugsley. Nearly 3 decades later, in April 2009, the 67-year-old actor was at his home in Austin, Texas. That night, a 26-year-old man, recently released from prison, broke into Perryman's home. The man, who had no connection to the actor, attacked him with an axe, killing him before stealing his car. The murder was brutal, random, and utterly inexplicable. Perryman's death is terrifying because it expands the curse's reach through time and logic. It wasn't an onset accident or a pre-existing illness. It was a savage, arbitrary act of violence that occurred 27 years after the film's release. This suggests the curse is not a targeted entity, but a lingering stain of bad luck and tragedy. A form of dark karma that can erupt at any moment for anyone who was ever involved, no matter how minor their role. It implies that no one connected to Poltergeist is ever truly safe.
The furniture moving, the furniture being thrown upside down.
What particular tape stands out in your mind?
Well, I think one particular tape.
Knock. 1 for no and 2 for yes.
Before we reveal the top 4 horrifying truths, let us look at the timeline. When viewed in order, the argument for coincidence begins to crumble under the sheer weight of the tragedy. 2 murders. 4 deaths in the span of just 6 years. A near fatal disaster. This is the grim record of the Poltergeist films, and the most horrifying events are yet to come. Number 4. The Desecrated Ground. This is one of the most terrifying scenes in horror history. a moment of absolute primal fear. But what the audience and the actors didn't know was that the horror was real. The skeletons clawing at Jo Beth Williams were not props. They were actual human remains. The production team made a chillingly practical decision. At the time, it was far cheaper to purchase real skeletons from a medical supply company than it was to fabricate convincing fakes out of rubber or plastic. So they did. Jo Beth Williams spent 4 to 5 days filming in that muddy water, surrounded by real corpses, completely unaware of the truth until after the shoot was over. The irony is staggering. The entire plot of Poltergeist is driven by a developer's greedy decision to build a housing development over a cemetery without moving the bodies. The filmmakers, in a bid to save money, committed the exact same act of desecration that the movie warns against. For believers in the curse, this is not just another creepy fact. This is the origin story. This is the moment the filmmakers, wittingly or not, performed the very ritual that summoned the real-life poltergeist. They disturbed the dead, and the dead, it seems, did not rest easy. Number 3. The first star to fall. In 1982, Dominique Dunne was a rising star. As the oldest daughter, Dana Freeling, in Poltergeist, she was on the cusp of a major career. But just 5 months after the film's release, her bright future was violently extinguished. On the night of October 30th, 1982, Dunne was at her home when her abusive ex-boyfriend, John Sweeney, showed up demanding to reconcile. When she refused, he attacked her in her own driveway. He grabbed her by the throat and strangled her for what the coroner later estimated was at least 3 minutes. When police arrived, Sweeney met them with his hands in the air and confessed, "I killed my girlfriend." Dominique Dunne was rushed to the hospital but never regained consciousness. She was declared brain dead, and 5 days later, at the age of 22, she was removed from life support. The horror was compounded by the injustice that followed. Sweeney was charged with murder, but in a controversial trial, he was convicted of the much lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to just 6.5 years in prison and was released on parole after serving only 2.5. Dominique Dunne's death was the first tragedy to strike the cast. It was a horrifying intersection of real-world evil and the film's dark mythology. It's as if the supernatural malevolence of the film acted as a magnet, attracting a human monster into its orbit, and the curse ensured that even after the ultimate tragedy, there would be no justice and no peace. Number 2, The Lost Angel. She was the heart of the franchise. Heather O'Rourke, with her stark blonde hair and big, inquisitive eyes, was the innocent soul at the center of the storm. As Carol Ann Freeling, she was the character the spirits wanted, the child they stole from her family. Her real-life fate would become the most heartbreaking and iconic tragedy of the Poltergeist Curse. In 1987, during the filming of Poltergeist 3, Heather was misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease. Then, on the morning of February 1st, 1988, just weeks after her 12th birthday, she suddenly collapsed at home. She suffered a cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital. Doctors discovered she had a severe bowel obstruction and rushed her into emergency surgery. She suffered a second cardiac arrest in the recovery room and died that afternoon. Her official cause of death was congenital intestinal stenosis, complicated by septic shock. But doctors were baffled. The head of gastroenterology at a major university hospital called her death distinctly unusual, stating that a birth defect so severe should have caused digestive problems throughout her life. Yet Heather had been largely asymptomatic before it suddenly became fatal. Her family, believing the initial misdiagnosis cost her her life, later filed a wrongful death lawsuit. The medical ambiguity was just enough to fuel the legend. The girl who was taken by ghosts on screen was now taken in real life, suddenly and mysteriously. It felt like a dark prophecy fulfilled. The curse had claimed its most precious symbolic prize. Number 1. The price of a poltergeist. What is the single most horrifying truth about the movie Poltergeist? It is not one event, it is the pattern. It is the overwhelming, undeniable accumulation of tragedy that orbits this single horror franchise. It is the fact that the filmmakers desecrated real human remains, mirroring the very sin their film condemned. It is the fact that the two on-screen sisters, bound together in a fictional family, met two of the most tragic ends imaginable. One brutally murdered in her youth, the other lost to a baffling illness as a child. It is the fact that the man who played the shaman who fought the film's evil, and the man who embodied that evil, both died soon after their work was done. It is the near-fatal accidents, the violent, random murders decades later, the haunted homecomings, and the on-set attacks. You can call it coincidence, you can call it bad luck, but the sheer volume and thematic resonance of these events is staggering. The curse is the name we give to an unbearable reality. That one film is the epicenter of a cluster of death and suffering so profound, it defies easy explanation. The true horror of Poltergeist is that the story is stained with real pain, real loss, and real death. It has become a haunted artifact. The final horrifying truth is not whether a curse is real, but the undeniable pattern of tragedy that asks a chilling question. Coincidence? Or the terrifying price of disturbing the dead?
They're here.